to hear question gender roles and demand empowered female portrayals. It proved that true equality means confronting and dismantling harmful male dominance. Drive on, ladies.
Welcome to She Became Visible. Let's get going. We've got a great show today. We're going to be talking about feminine power. We're going to be copying Thelma and Louise, and we're going to be talking about finding a friend that helps you bury the body. That's what we're doing today. So join us on She Became Visible today.
You're wearing a sweater that was selected for you by the people in this room from a pile of stuff.
Give me a full ballerina skirt and a hint of saloon, and I'm on board.
I have a hole in my stomach!
I can't go back.
Welcome to the She Became Visible podcast. I'm your host, Renee Steelman. This podcast is my story. It's your story. It's our story. It's all the stories of all the women who one day knew that it was time to remember who they were, who they are, and stand up and be seen. Welcome to She Became Visible. As I mentioned in the beginning, today we're going to be talking about the 1991 movie Thelma and Louise. But we're not going to be talking about the movie itself. We're going to be talking about what the movie displayed, the real life experience of many of us women. And I have brought on to be my co-host today, JANE CHRISTIE from Scotland. And she's going to be my Thelma. I don't know if I'm Thelma or she's Louise, but I'm going to bring her on. And we're going to talk about being a woman in the 21st century. The name of her podcast is 21st Century Saints. And you would think in the 21st century that we would have made far strides in equality, in gender bias, in gender roles, and in understanding the genders and how we can be better in our relationships. You would think we would have moved farther. And I think in many ways we have. But in this political season, and I'm going to talk to Jane about what's going on in Scotland, but I know in America, there is a huge effort to take us back. And I think watching a movie that was made in 1991 might be a really great way to go back a little bit and remind ourselves what we were fighting for. So let me bring my fabulous friend on today. There she is.
Hey.
Oh my gosh. You know, really, when they talk about having a friend, you know you have a friend when you can confide in them, they keep your secrets, and they will help you bury the bodies. And those friends are hard to find. I've had a lot of friends throughout my lifetime. They were all involved in the church, and they were all, I met them through the church. I when we when we would go on double dates with our husbands, he knew him from the church. I knew her from the church. We talked about church. We went to church activities. And so, everything was kind of revolved around that. But I started to realize that the one person in particular that I thought was my best friend, she was not keeping my confidence. That if we were out with three women, if it was her, I, and someone else, then the other person would say, hey, hey, she told me blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, what are you doing? What are you?
Well, for your own good, because how is she supposed to support you without getting some group consensus? And so a little bit of support wrapped up in, no, actually, that's what's called betrayal. You've just Yeah.
Exactly. So finding someone that knows how to keep your confidences or knows how to not tell the police where the body's buried is unique. And I feel Jane, are you just bummed that Sunstone UK was canceled and made digital?
Well,
Kind of, maybe.
Renee, the stories I have to tell you, the stories this has been the craziest, I would say the craziest year.
Yeah.
And it's just got crazier as it's gone on. So Sunstone UK, I'm part of the committee in the UK who were organising it, and it just became really clear that things are so intense over here that we're going to have to take some space. And that's why it became digital. So we all really, really needed it's not even that we need a break. I think we need something a lot more sort of stable.
Yeah.
But we knew we needed the conversations. We knew we needed especially because there was some things that were on the discussion list that were so helpful. So, for example, we had heard your topic, which the hope was, we'd be able to hear last year. Oh my goodness, we have to hear that this year because it is exciting and women especially need to know about this. And so actually, Sunstone this year, our number one thing was Renee's talk. So it's so good. And I had been chatting to Grace, who's doing all of the work around Sunstone, who is just a legend.
Yeah.
And this was right after you had finished recording. And Grace was like, that was awesome. So yes, the way it worked out, we were disappointed to have to do it.
Yeah.
But coincidentally, the weekend that it would have taken place,
yes,
we wouldn't have had the resources to emotionally and physically even just to all get there.
Okay,
so it was meant to be. Yeah.
You're so right. I did not connect because I knew it had been canceled, a couple weeks ago, more than that actually. And then the Nemo thing happened, which is what you're talking about. I kind of put it together, but I didn't put it together that it would have been going on at the exact same time when I'm sure he would have been a feature speaker, a feature, presenter. And that's just not going to happen. And it's funny that you would say that because my husband and I had purchased tickets and reserved the hotel and stuff. We thought after it got canceled, we thought, well, let's go ahead and just go. I mean, I want to go to Scotland. I want to meet Jane. We were going to go over to Ireland and maybe do a little ancestry, dig up some, relatives or something. And, and my husband and I were sitting there watching TV. And I turned to him and I said, I just don't think we should go right now. The world is in a cuckoo land. And there's so many things every day you get on the news and there's so many things. And I know that Europe is going through political things as well as the United States going through political things. And I just said, I just don't feel good traveling right now. So it's funny that you would say that.
Yeah.
Interesting.
It gets there's a lot of baggage attached to this word, but I think one thing that I would like women to keep in their, if you've had any kind of LDS background, if you're still in, or if you've left, discernment. Yeah. We have so often seen it as a sort of a gift that you're allowed to use whenever you have permission to use it. And it should look a particular way. Yes. But actually, when we're talking about that inner knowing, I think often women have this ability just to discern. We just there is that knowing, and I like to. So I'm going to reclaim discernment for us.
Absolutely. I just saw a gentleman on TikTok, I believe, and he said, "Listen to your wife." He said, "My wife is able to look at my associates and go, that guy's going to murder you. That guy's your wing guy." This, and that where the men are like, what? Eric, it's not going to kill me, you know. But I remember so many times my husband would hire someone new and I would go, yeah, that's not going to work. And sure enough, they've embezzled $8,000 from the company or something like that, you know. Women just have a way. And the sad thing about that, Jane, is you're so right. And I remember when we'd move to a different city, we'd go to a different ward, and I love the wife, but I would look at this guy and I'd go, something's off. Something's off. Sure enough, you find out, you know, he's abusive, verbally abusive or something like that. But everybody at church is going, Steve? No way. Steve's great. What are you talking about? You know?
So I call him creepy hugger guy, because the Steve, he doesn't even necessarily reach the threshold of anything with which you can say, he did this and that's why I feel. But when Steve gives you a hug, you want to climb out of your own skin. And every ward has a Steve. And so, yes, in honor of Steve, we see you, mate. You are who we call hugger guy.
Yeah. And you know what's funny? I don't know with your time frame if you're able to listen to After Dark with Bill Reel and RFM. They do it on Saturday nights, but I don't know if you've listened to last Saturday night, but they had a call in, and this guy, he started out. Did you hear it? Did you listen to it at all?
I didn't.
Okay. He started out and it was weird. And everybody was making comments like, he's drunk, you know, hey dude, put down the glass, or, you know, no more edibles for you, you know, making comments like that. And suddenly I thought, you know what? This isn't funny. There's something wrong. There's something off with this guy. And he was saying things like, you know, I met with my bishop and he gave, you know, there's a restraining order. And if you find me on the church property, and I just thought, okay, this isn't funny. I think we need to let this guy go and move on. And one of the people that I had on my podcast a couple of years ago, she's a therapist in Arizona, and she was following it. And she said, you're absolutely right. There's something off here. And Bill and RFM and all the guys out there, they're like, oh man, dude, you got to get, you know, they just didn't pick it up. And I just, yeah, you're right. When you talk about discernment, sorry guys, you don't got it, you know?
And I think what I would include with that is, and it's a bit of a homage to our Thelma and Louise. What can come with that is the impression of impulsivity, because when we've made a decision, and sometimes we sit in that decision for a really long time and wrestle with it, and let's see how this is going to play out. When you know you got to go, or when you know the person you have to get away from, you know, when there is a clear, no, we are not, this is not happening today. We've decided. And so that impulsivity that we can doubt ourselves because the decision gets made really quite quickly.
Yeah.
And it works. It's worth listening to. And we'd have to justify it quite a lot to ourselves and to others. But no, we can discern, we can know, and we can act.
Yeah. And that's a perfect segue, Jane, into what you've done this last year, because I remember when I first found you, and you were the kind of the apologist for the Brit Vengers. There would be a clip and you would call everybody back and you'd say, now, come on, guys, you know, you gotta, let's think about this a little bit more in the gray. We're getting a little black and white. Let's look at this from you try to show them different sides, because you were a believing member and you were struggling because you were very nuanced, very aware of what was going on, but you were struggling because you thought we can do better. You were always that I know we can do better. And so we're going to talk about the straw that broke the camel's back, the line in the sand, where you said, speaking of discernment, you said, oh, this isn't going to get better. This isn't going to get better. And I don't know if I can do anything to make it better. So we're going to talk about that. Let me start out by showing a little clip. In my introduction to She Became Visible, I play a little clip from the movie Thelma and Louise, and I'm going to show you where I got that clip. So let's bring that on just for fun. I hope this doesn't get banned because of some copyright thing. I think if I keep it under a minute, I can do it. I think
Yeah.
that's the rule.
It's
So
good
let's
use.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Can you hear that, Jane?
What do you mean? Thelma, I'm not making any deals.
Okay, that's hard to hear, but what she's saying is she had just gotten off the phone with the police, and Thelma looks at her and says, "Are you going to make a deal? Are you going to, rat me out and make a deal with the cops?" And Louise says, "I would never do that."
Crossed over in me. I can't go back.
Okay, that's the part that I used in my clip. And I love when she says something's crossed over in me and I
Yes.
can't go back. And that's what this whole movie, it starts out, it shows Thelma with a very abusive, very arrogant husband who, I don't care what we have for dinner. Why do you think I care? It's all about me being the manager of this car dealership. And he's just a jerk. And then in Louise's case, she has a man that she loves, but they've been together for a long time. And she's like, get off the pot or pee, one of the two. And he's not, he doesn't want to make a commitment to her. And so she's struggling with that. Do you love me or don't you love me? Do you want to be with me? Don't you? I mean, it's just the old story that we all hear. But I love this part, which she says, something in me has crossed over and I can't go back. And that is what happens when, and I hate this term, I hate this cliche, break the shelf. I hate that. But it is a good analogy for when you just go, oh no, I'm not doing this anymore. And let me show you one more clip. This is really cool. Feel awake. Are you awake? She says, well, my eyes are open. I've never felt this awake. And again, I believe that's the feeling when people can somehow get rid of their cognitive dissonance and it all makes sense and they are awakened. They are visible. They're like, I have been scammed my whole life. I've been told a lie and I'm awake. And I hate the way I hate the woke, everybody's put that but there is a sense of it's learning. It really is. It's just a process of learning. When you learn more, when you learn that you could do better, if you don't have the desire to do better when you know better, then there's something wrong with your integrity. And we're going to get into that. But when you know better and you want to do better, that's moving forward and that's becoming awakened. So let's talk about your awakening.
Well,
call it.
yeah, because I just really quickly, because I think it's worth pointing out. It seems so much in the movie, it seems so much easier for one of the women. It seems like, yeah, she just has that kind of personality and the kind of quieter, do what she's told kind of girl is going along with it. And you see this strength evolving that she can be this because she has a friend who she can sort of stand on that shoulders. They are making each other better. And she is no longer being told what to do. And she's making these observations about herself. But I guess what I would add, because we get this in the context of the film, but, when we talk about it in a podcast, I remember one of the things that I always ask people when we're having a conversation about with people who have left the church, I always like to ask them, would you, if you could change things and go back and not know any of this stuff, would you do it? Now, the answer 99% of the time is, oh no, I wouldn't go back. Because we like being awake, right? It's that feeling, I am awake.
Yeah.
But every now and again, and it's relatively common, that people will say, I don't know. I think I might want to go back and not know this because this hurts so much. And they can't, but it's just sort of acknowledging that there is a price that's being paid for that awakeness. This Thelma and Louise didn't just go for a car ride. They were going through some stuff. And so I just think it's worth acknowledging that when we get to the point where we can feel our awakeness, also let's honor you got there, you did this, and it was hard. It takes it out of our mental health, doesn't it?
You know what? I love that you said that, because that's a good question. I've never thought about that, because if I didn't know what I had, if I didn't find out about the rock and the hat, would the other things have made a difference? But the rock and the hat was a big thing for me, because it was such an obvious deception. The paintings, the art, the story, everything was deception. And so that was a big thing for me. And then I just layered everything else on top of it. So that's interesting, because my husband knows these things. I mean, I remember coming out of the bedroom going, did you know Joseph Smith translated with a rock and the hat? I mean, this is a guy that's been in the stake presidency. He's been a bishop. He's like, what are you talking about? I didn't know anything about that. It doesn't make him happy, but it doesn't change his mind at all.
But we also, there are people for whom when that metaphorical, that we hate that, because I also hate that metaphor, when that shelf breaks, there is something within them that breaks too. And well, I mean, within all of us, right? So something breaks, and it's our trust, it's our hearts. And people can end up in such a vulnerable, when your whole worldview is flipped on its head. And when people have acknowledged to me that, I don't know, I think maybe, I would go back. It's because they've paid a price, and it has been so hard that it's almost a temptation. I wouldn't have to go through this, because I wouldn't choose to go through this. I wonder if before the journey, if they knew what was ahead, would you still choose that journey? Ladies, would you still get in that car? Because this is going to happen, and this is you're going to feel awake, but all of these things are going to happen.
And I think that's one of the most fascinating things about the movie is, and the acting that both Susan Sarandon and Gina Davis, because there is a virtual turnover in both. They switched roles, and it was amazing to see how Gina Davis, how her character of just going along, and she caused a lot of the problems that, because she was just so innocent and believing and kind, just like you see in the church. It's just like, well, I was just trying to be nice. And well, he just said he would do this. And I just told him that because I thought he wouldn't tell anybody. And so that's just the way she was, this nice person. And you can just see where she flips, and all of a sudden she's grabbing Susan Sarandon and going, get in the car. And Susan Sarandon, after their money is gone, she's like, that's it. I can't think anymore. And Gina Davis took over. And it's such a beautiful acting depiction, because it's very subtle, but obvious. And you're right. And I think that's what you see if you are watching. Well, like with you, I mean, when I've watched you just be so kind and benevolent to the church, and accepting of, these people are not perfect, and let's talk about this. And yes, darn it, that policy makes me so angry. And then let's absolutely perfect example. And you're absolutely right, because I told my husband this the other day. I said, one of the things I don't like is when they ask the question, if you could go back and tell your 18-year-old self something, what would it be? And I've always thought, I don't know. I don't think you can ever do that. There's no way you can tell a 14 or a 15-year-old, don't do this. In my case, don't have 6 children, only have 5, because your last child is going to be severely disabled. At 15, you'd go, that's okay. I can do it. I'm strong, because you don't know. And so it's a silly kind of question that I've never really liked. Life just has to be lived often. But let's talk about your journey, because I want to combine with what what made you flip, and then also the work that you're doing, because that also ties in with Thelma and Louise, because you are about protecting the children in the United Kingdom. And the saddest thing is that what you're doing over there is something that cannot be done in America. And I think that is like, what is wrong with this? Is an American church. This church was founded in America. They talk about taking the gospel out into the world. But then when they go out into the world, other countries go, oh, yeah, you can't do that. And they go, in America, they go, yeah, you can't build a temple that's 350,000 feet high and lit up 24/7. And the church goes, watch me, hold my beer, But in other countries, they go, oh, okay, let's go back to the drawing board. So anyway.
Oh, this is going to be fun. Yes.
I'm laying out way too many things. So let's start out with I'm going to play a little bit of the talk. You're a very dutiful member of the church, watching General Conference on television, broadcast to the world from Salt Lake City. And this is one of the general authorities that is speaking. And then I want to hear your reaction for when you heard this.
The things of God. It means trusting the doctrine of Christ more than the philosophies of men. Likewise, we must resist the temptation to walk in our own way after the image of our own God, whose image is in the likeness of the world. The oppositional pole of this world is an essential part of God's plan of salvation. How we respond to the pole is the essence of who we are, a measure of our integrity. The worldly pole can be as direct as to destroy fidelity in marriage, or as subtle as posting anonymous comments critical of church doctrine or culture. Exercising integrity in our choices is an outward expression of an inner commitment to follow the Savior, Jesus Christ. Just as integrity flows from the first great commandment to love God, being true to each other flows from the second, to love our neighbors as ourselves. A life of integrity is not a life of perfection. It is a life in which we strive every day to foremost be true to God, and within that context to be true to others. President Oakes reminds us, our zeal to keep the second commandment must not cause us to forget the first. The world increasingly grapples with integrity by imposing codes of conduct or ethical rules that govern the relationships between people and institutions. While good.
So, and I
talking
think
about human rights there, is that where we were going, Elder Gerard?
And I think, first of all, I really, when you are in any kind of a professional authoritarian position, normally you'll get feedback from people where they might say things like, Mr. Gerard, you got to speed it up a little bit. People are dying back there. You cannot talk. Right. You got to speed this up a little bit, or that was too long or too repetitive. But they don't do that. You're just like, oh my God, just please, But anyway, but what he was saying and what he was starting to quote was when President Oakes said, the commandment to love your neighbor does not necessarily mean you really have to love them if they're not living the Mormon lifestyle. And, it was kind of like, but are your neighbors transgender? Are your neighbors gay or lesbian? Then, you love them, obviously, because that's the thing that all the Christians say. Oh, we love you. We just don't love what you're doing or how you're living or how you're raising your children or all of that bull crap. But what was it in his talk about integrity that you were like, what?
Well, I can tell you the exact moment.
Okay. Yes.
Okay. Up until this point, I would refer to myself as an engaged church member. So I historically was a convert. My husband's a non-member. if you're in the church in Scotland, you have to really, really want to be Mormon. It's not straightforward. There isn't a culture that's going to keep us in there. My entire life was the church, which is different, I think, from seeing it in, you know, the US sense, because there's a world that's there. Here, there is this tiny bubble of maybe 50 people tops. I was organising activities. I served in, you know, various callings, from Young Women's President to, you know, just the usual church callings that women tend to have. When my son, who has special needs, when we realised that he did not have a place in the church, and it would break my heart to say it, they wouldn't have a class, they wouldn't call people to teach him. There were no adaptations. He couldn't go to youth classes, to midweek young men's class, and that was okay because he had made it. And so it was my job not to think about that, but how to think about how I am going to be able to be in the celestial kingdom with him. They were speaking about him like he was dead. And, you know,
True.
nothing to learn from him. And I remember saying, you don't even know what his condition is. No one's ever asked. You don't have any interest in what is happening with him. And I remember saying, the level of his needs are increasing. You're missing out on this stuff and that I get to have. And trust me, it is where God is. If you don't do something, then this will be me. I am going to not be able to attend church. And will you do the same thing? Will you just let me go? And I remember the face of real sort of concern and, oh, that wouldn't be very good. So, yeah. And of course, it happened. I could not physically get out to church because I'm looking after Ronan. I'm up all night, and it's my privilege and honour, and I hated it, and I resent the fact that I can't have my own life. It's affecting my mental health at the time. I became very, very ill, and it was so. You get this, Renee. So celestial. You're talking about, you know, being Christ-like in church, and these complicated interactions where you're being hit or screamed at, or just watching this pain. Oh my goodness, it is just celestial. And that was my life. So when it got to the point when COVID hit, I thought, oh, you're all going to be here with me. You're all going to understand, because now you're all going to be isolated. Can we maybe think about praying together online? Someone told me, it's okay, we don't have to, because we pray in our families. And I thought, screw you, girl, screw you. And so the nuance had always been there, because that's how I came back to church, was engaging with all of these things. But the social sort of side of the isolation, that can only then at that point be perceived as rejection. You don't want me. Christmas caroling for people right across the road, and Ronan's right here. He would have loved that. Ronan would have, and he was waiting and hoping that you would come visit. And that's been our lives. He's waited. So I would come home when I did get to church, and the first thing I would do when I got home was I would lie to Ronan, and I would tell him all of these people. Okay, so the bishop was asking for you. This person said hi, and it was just horrible. And he would feel really good. He would feel remembered. So yeah, doing people's jobs for them. So by the time it gets to conference time and I'm engaging with this stuff, people went back to normal life after COVID. And of course, we're forgotten again, but even more so because they've all moved on. And to be fair, that's what happens in life. That's not just a church thing. That's one of the things that we face in our communities. The only thing at this point that is keeping me engaged with the church is integrity. I made a commitment. This is between me and God. And so all of the things that are unhelpful, I can let them go. I can engage with them rationally and reasonably. And does it matter about the rock in the hat to me right now if what is being experienced is really, really good, if those fruits that we will know people by are really good? And it got harder and harder to see. It got harder to see that and again, there are so few people there.
Yeah.
What are they supposed to do, right? I mean, it's all I was ever looking for was just occasional connection. And when I say occasional, a couple of times a year would have been lovely. But I'm engaging and I'm staying and I'm watching all of this pain and I'm doing all of this work to be able to say, you know, the November 2014 policy of exclusion, that for me is not of God. I can stand up against it and I can do that and stay in the church because of integrity, because I am here to stand in this place and hold open the door so that if you need to leave, then I am with you and I will bless that journey. If you need to stay, then you should be able to fully participate as someone who is of worth and who can feel loved. You should be able to engage with church as a community where you can come to Christ and not be met with all of these barriers before you even get anywhere near Christ. So that was where I was at in the talk. I think it's where he begins talking about the world and he's making that, that everything that's bad is coming from the world. Now, let me tell you something about the world, Elder Gerard. It's the world that's been supporting me when the church left. I feel like someone who's been abandoned by my religion. I'm asking questions like, should I just go to my local church in the United Kingdom? I'm sure it's the same in America. There are churches everywhere that are so close by to me. I could do this in a spare 5 minutes and just to be able to worship and have some sacred breathing space. But I'm trying to make this work. And you're giving a hard time to the people who are actually being of real worth and value. You're criticizing people in the world. Just where you cut off, yeah, you're talking about sort of policies and individuals. You're talking about people's human rights. That's a good thing, right? And as soon as someone starts telling you that something that is good and is right and is enshrined by law, that those are righteous things, then you know that there's something off. It's that discernment. This is not okay. Then he starts to talk about integrity, and he says a lot of good things about integrity. I would totally object to the fact that you have to be Christian to have integrity, which is something that he is fairly clearly stating. Many people with great integrity are not Christian, and we should be valuing and honoring that. But then, this is what he says. Let me quote. Ugh. I'm sorry, and trigger warning for everyone. Okay. Saying we have integrity is insufficient if our actions are inconsistent with our words. That's absolutely correct. Likewise, Christian kindness is not a substitute for integrity. Now, by this point in the talk, I have done so many mental gymnastics to try and give him the grace to think, okay, surely it's not this bad. It's just going to be one of those talks that we can just resign to that wasn't helpful pile, and we'll focus on another talk. And keep in mind, I'm alone. I need this conference. Give me something I can work with, people.
Yeah.
Christ-like Christian integrity. I mean, so actually being like Christ and having that kind of integrity, That's not good enough, because you're reframing what integrity actually means. It means something else. Now, my son serves in the British Army, and integrity is one of their core values. Wonderful. And he had come home that day of conference, and I had said, I am not doing this anymore. I'm resigning my membership of the church. And I was devastated. I did not want to be here. And I'd said, here's why. They are redefining my integrity. My integrity, you know, the scripture, I will not be parted from it. Son, they're redefining integrity. This is what he said. And he said, if someone tries to redefine integrity, then they don't have integrity. In that one simple line, I was like, yes, that's it. You don't have integrity. And I don't believe that you realize that, Elder. I think it's because you're trying to do something, you're trying to make a point, but how you're doing it, using a sacred value and twisting it like that, that is ungodly. That is unchristian. That is not what Christ teaches. Depending on which day of the week it is, I don't know where I am with Jesus. I don't know if I'm Christian or like, just, I mean, I am so jury's out with everything.
Yeah.
But you do not get to do that with core values. Integrity is what kept me fighting for so long. And if you take that away from me and make it about something else, then I refuse. I will not be party to that. And so I was devastated to send in my letter. I announced it that night. I asked if I would be able to have a conversation first with my bishop or stake president. My bishop he was away at the time. My stake president had said, I'm sure that your bishop will be in touch. And I thought, oh, this is a really good stake president, by the way. He's a darling, but I needed you and you weren't there. And so by the time the bishop returned, I had said, no, I'm not waiting for a couple of weeks to do this. I've made my decision. And so there we are. No conversation. What I did also ask is, although this is my decision, will you please stay in touch? I love you all. I would like you to stay in touch. So if that means, you know, I'm thinking if I was a bishop, I'd be thinking that would maybe mean ministry or emails. And
Nothing.
Well, I'll let you all work out if that
Nothing.
didn't go anywhere.
No.
Nothing. How did you discern that, Renee?
You know what's funny, Jane? And I don't know if this is, I'm sure people somebody's going to, I'm going to say this. I'm putting myself out there, and I'm sure people are going to jump all over this because it's kind of like, well, you're the one that left the club. What do you care? You know, type comment. But there's a fabulous stake president where we live in Arizona. Very nice, wonderful man. He literally calls every person in his stake on their birthday. So he called my husband on Monday because it was his birthday. And so we were shopping, we were out and about, and he said, oh, it was President, whatever. And he's calling me for my birthday. And he said, he's such a great man. I said, he is. I said, did he ask you, how's your wife? And he said, no, he didn't mention you at all. And I said,
well, it wasn't your birthday, Renee.
No, it wasn't my birthday. But I just thought, you know, it's so funny. If I was a non-member who was taking the discussions, they would be all over the place.
That is it.
And so it's like, you talk about being Christ-like. You're talking about, we don't care what religion you are. We love everyone, unless you used to be a Mormon and you resigned and then you are dead. You know?
And that was what would blow my mind. I would be like, hold on. Now, to be fair, there is one person who consistently, regularly has always messaged. And that is because he's that kind of person. He has done that throughout his church life, not just with me, with everyone. And he's a good man. So when, you know, I just want to acknowledge that the people are great, but what I don't get is one of the things that Mormons are taught about consistently is missionary work. How is it possible that you are missing the obvious. I mean, it is so obvious. But I'll tell you why. I have a really good relationship with everyone at church too. I think the podcast did complicate that. To be honest, lots of people were really gracious. But when someone's not there, but my ward has always felt like home. I had the privilege of when they were 14, my sibling's child needed to get out of their home, and they are transgender. So at 14, we got to bring them into our home, and we sat down in that first few days of them being here. And they're our forever child now. They are our fourth and youngest child. It's wonderful to have them in our lives. And we sat with the For Strength of Youth book because we are good Latter-day Saints, and I wanted to make sure that this is a home where you're going to hear this. This is not what we believe or practice in our home, but you're going to hear this at church. So I just need you to be aware. These are the clear statements that are made, and we are not okay with this. Just so that they can immediately hear you don't have to be brainwashed into this and stuff like that. And my kid was engaging with Mormonism in this new way, this nuanced way, this way that actually young people know how to just discard the junk and just focus on what's important. And they would have visits from missionaries, one, maybe two in a row, and then the missionaries wouldn't come back. And then I had asked the bishop, what's going on with that? I'd asked the stake president, and he's like, well, we wouldn't tell anyone not to teach someone. And I thought, oh, there's something going on here. So yeah, my transgender kid had very clearly asked repeatedly to be baptized, and nothing. Now, this is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Baptism is everything. And no.
And this was before this latest change in the handbook. This was over a year ago.
When this was 3 years ago. Yeah. And so what do you do with that? What did they do with that? Come and join us and immediately experience rejection from a religious community who are, and they were having really positive interactions. I wonder consistently what those missionaries did with that, because clearly there was something going on. I don't think that's a reach to, I'm not into conspiracy theories, but I don't think that takes much to speculate. So yes, integrity is what kept us in this space, that this is worth fighting for. This is worth, I can see what it can be.
Yeah.
I see the potential, but when it's so, that is rotten, that is ungodly, then no.
The ironic part is he's talking about the world and how we don't follow the world, but I'm watching, and I wish I could remember the details, but I was listening to Mike Pence, who was the vice president under Donald Trump. And he was telling this story of when the insurrection happened on January 6th of 2000, whatever it was, that Trump had asked him to make this law where he could go ahead and take over, even though he had lost the election. And he was struggling. He didn't know what to do. And this is a very Christian man. And he was really struggling. And his son came home, kind of like what you were saying about your kids. His son came home and said, Dad, this is about your integrity. This is about telling the truth. This isn't about, is this right or is this wrong for Donald Trump? And he said, I knew right then what I had to do. So he told Donald Trump, I can't do that. It's against the law. I cannot do this. It's against the law. And so that's when all of this thing happened. But I mean, can you imagine being the vice president of the United States, a Christian, and then fighting over whether I do the right thing, whether I because of the pressure. But that's the thing that I think is so hard, is when you see these men who are praising and worshiping and kissing the rings of the presidency. And so they're leaving their integrity, their morals, their values to side and praising. So he's praising Oakes for the message that he had given before, where we don't necessarily have to follow when they say love one another. It's like, well, what exactly is love one another? And what's funny is I don't know what's going on in the rest of the world, but in the United States, there is this movement right now under the title of Christian nationalism, saying we want to turn this country back into the Christian nation it was designated by God to be. And so I was scrolling through YouTube and I saw this thing, and it was like the horrible things the Pope has said. And I thought, oh, well, that's a nice change. Let's listen to something horrible the Pope has said instead of our guys, right? So I flip on, and this guy starts talking, and he said, do you want to know what he said? He actually said that all religions bring people to God. If you're Buddhist, if you're Shinto, if you're Hindu, it's a path to God. How dare the Pope say that? What kind of a Pope is he? And I'm like, oh, that took a turn I wasn't expecting. It's like, okay,
Right. Well, and interestingly, that's how I had intended to well, it's how I was living, just to survive spiritually, because I do have a spiritual need. I do have a need for that kind of connection. Lots of people can live without it. It's just it's my way. I would attend other churches and would have positive experiences. Particularly the Community of Christ gang were exceptional. That was my spiritual home for a long time. And I formalized that relationship earlier this year in Loch Lomond. We had a wonderful experience. But yes, to be able to hear those kinds of healthy messages, and that's how. So when I said I was done, I also made it very clear. Oh wait, I'm not done with Mormonism. I'm not done with this church. I am done identifying in this way. I'm done with that formal relationship with you. Oh, but I'm not done. We've got work to do here. I have friends. This is Latter-day Saintness is in my DNA. It's the language that I have used to connect with the divine. So rather than just bin that, oh no, we have work to do here, and let's do that in a healthy, respectful way. I've always, even when I was a good girl, I've always been tough where I need to be tough on the church. I mean, it's got a bit cursy and sweary at times. It's got really raw and messy. But yes, there will be a respectful distance now, and we'll engage like that.
So tell everyone, because like you say, your story, your childhood was not an easy path. You didn't have the picket fence and the puppy and the mom and the dad and the whole bit. And so you've gone through a lot. And so you have a deep love in your heart for the welfare of children, protecting children. And so talk a little bit, because in the movie Thelma and Louise, it never really is revealed, but they reference a couple of times, what happened to you in Texas? Thelma says, what happened to you in Texas? She doesn't say. And then eventually in the movie, the police officer says, I know what happened to you in Texas. Come in and talk. We can talk. And so you get the gist of what happened to her, when she killed the gentleman that was trying to rape Thelma. And so you get the idea, but it's never really brought out. But because of what she had experienced personally, this is what made her the vigilante that she was. And that's the beautiful thing about going through hard times in life. Like, when you're talking, Jane, about taking care of Ronan and loving Ronan and how it's such a celestial experience. And it's hard to explain to people, like, I love you, that I love that you love my son. I love that when we bring him to church, you would say, hey, TJ, it's so good to see you. And they were very genuine. They loved him. And, he was loud. He loved music, so he would sing, and people would laugh. And you know, I even had a couple of other women. See, this is why I love women so much, Jane. We had decided that I didn't learn this, but we had somehow learned that those back pews in the back of the church, the short pews, those are made for wheelchairs. We thought they were just made for the old people because there's only 2 of them. But we found out, no, that's for a wheelchair. Then you put the wheelchair here, there's a space, and then you sit, you know. And so we started taking over this last pew. And there was a lady in my ward, Erin, I will always love you for this, but she became that pew police. I mean, if we sat down and we weren't at church yet, she'd say, I'm sorry, that's the Stillmans. The Stillman are sitting there. That's wheelchair reserved. And when I went to the bishop, when I found this out, and I said, you know what, Bishop, I just found out that those pews are made for wheelchairs. In fact, we were down in Texas visiting my daughter, and they actually had a placard on the pew that had the little wheelchair. Those are reserved. And I said, you know, we should get a placard. And he was like, yeah, it's not going to happen. I was like, oh, okay. You know, and then
because we have the pew police, we don't need a placard.
Yeah.
But I mean, yeah.
And then and exactly what you said. It's like you loved him, but you didn't go the extra mile. You didn't, like, there was no place for him. And my husband was just as bad. I'm going to blame this on him too, because the personality that you were talking about, the kind person, he'd say, I'll take TJ. He was the bishop. He'd say, I'll take TJ. I'm like, okay. So I'd go to Relief Society. And then if I happened to come out, I would see him in the foyer. And I'd say, what are you doing? Why isn't he back with the priests? He'd say, oh, I don't want to bother. I don't want to bother the priests. I'll just keep him out here with me. And I said, he loves being in there with those boys. He needs to be in there with those boys. And he would say, no, I don't want, we don't want to bother him. We don't want to bother anybody else. And there were times when my husband, the guy before him and the guy before him, when the new thing came out in the handbook that said you call someone to specifically work with those with special needs. And I said, are we going to call someone to work with TJ? And they were like, no, you got it. You look like you've got it pretty well handled. And I was like, oh, okay. So as long as I can stay in the foyer, never go to Relief Society, sit out in the foyer with him during sacrament, because my husband's in the bishopric. And that's okay. That's okay, because I got it. And I did get it. I got it. And you and I both were very capable people. And so it's like, you're right. I got it, you know? And, but when I couldn't get into the Relief Society room because they had chairs lined up all the way to the door, and there was no room for the wheelchair in the Relief Society room, or I can't get into the building because they've decided it's a security risk to have those automatic things that you push. I don't know if you have those in the UK, but there'll be a button that says handicap. You push it and the doors automatically open. And they didn't want to put those on the building because they felt like that was, so there was, the only way you could get in was I stick my foot on the wheelchair and the other elbow on the door. And then I'm pushing the wheelchair in while I'm holding the door open, you know? And so little things like that, that you're like, so then when they talk, and I was talking to D-Vase about this, and they said, well, one of the great things about ripping the Salt Lake Temple and destroying everything is we're going to make it more accessible. I'm like, are you going to make it more accessible? Right. I don't think so. Because why don't you make your steakhouses more accessible? Why don't you make your steak buildings more inclusive, and your programs and your primary for all those poor little kids with sensory disorders that, that don't quite fit in well? It's not really an accessible thing. But anyway, so tell us,
this never happens. Just to quickly do a little bit of a diversion. This never happens. I have a visitor. Would you like to come and say hi? Or would you like to just stay there?
Stay there.
You're going to stay there. Okay. Ronan has joined us. And so Ronan's in the room, because I think Ronan has lots to think about, don't you? Yes.
Name, by the way.
I think lots of things are happening in the UK with building regulations that are more accessible. So anyone who needs to speak, there is now wheelchair ramps so there's lots and lots of good things that are happening.
Yeah.
But when you have an Erin, when you have someone who's willing to do that for your son, that is godly. That is truly what we're looking for.
That is the
and
Christ.
what that
Yeah.
right.
It
And
was
what
a
that does for
woman.
you.
Yeah. That's what I loved. It was another woman. All the men on the front couldn't see it. No one else could see it. But that woman,
Because someone loves your son.
I got, yes.
Right. And I wonder what would happen if your husband outside in the foyer really felt that the people in that room that he doesn't want to disturb, they love him so much that, you know what, we are really missing you. Will you come in? Because when you're not here, it is less good. Where are you, TJ? And if he could feel how loved his son was, I wonder how different that would be for him.
Yeah. Well, and I have to give an example. There was another young man. He and his wife are just the loveliest people. And she is a lot like you. She's gone through a lot, in her life, and they don't have children of their own. But my husband was out in the hallway with our son after we moved, and he was no longer in the bishopric. So I always say to him, when you were sitting up there in the royal seats, did TJ's voice bother you? He goes, no, I never heard him. I said, that's right. So now that you're not sitting there anymore and he was sitting next to me, I'm going to take him out. I'm going to take TJ out. I don't want him to bother anybody. I'm like, he's not bothering anybody. So he was out in the foyer, and this old guy, one of these old obnoxious snowbird guys that they have in Arizona, actually went up to him and said, your son is too loud. He's disturbing us. Could you move a little farther down the hallway? And my husband said, no problem. I'll just leave. And he actually was going to take him and go sit in the car. And this man who happened to be in the hallway went and got him and said, please don't leave. I'm sorry he said that to you. Please don't leave. And then the bishop heard about it. And then the bishop called me in and said, I'm so sorry. That's not how we feel. So I do have to give some men some props.
Yes.
There are some good men out there. I got one of them. You've got one of them. We got a few. There's a few out there. But
right. Exactly.
What did you do to start your movement, to start to ask for background checks for people that work with children? And it isn't just, it's not just in the Mormon church, right? I mean, this effort is a community, I don't know what they call it in Scotland, but it's tell everybody what it is, because I obviously am not explaining it well.
Well, first of all, I would frame this as being, sucky things have happened. I haven't, and until this very moment, I haven't ever talked about it in a podcast. I only ever spoke to my husband about it this year. I am a survivor of different types of abuse, and it had always been just my story. It wasn't something that I felt that I had to work through. It was, I've got so many other things that was just so far down the list. But my friend, Alana, was a survivor, and it was very real and raw for her. And when we first started the podcast, we knew we needed to tackle the subject of abuse. Alana went to go live her best life after Mormonism. So we had this incredible, definitely when we're thinking about Thelma and Louise, this woman is it. Sarah, who podcasts with me, my podcasting wife, and she is phenomenal. Now, she has so much experience from a social work point of view. She's had a lot of experience in leading and guiding in this work, supporting both survivors and offenders. And so she knows a lot about the psychology of abuse, about reporting. And now, to be fair, there are lots of people across the world who are Latter-day Saints who have been saying for many, many years, I go to work and there are clear policies here, and I know what child safety should look like because it's been shown to me in the workplace or in my child's school. It's all over the world. When I come to church, there is a gap, and lots of people have brought it up. So we are not the only ones who have ever thought about this. People have been trying to bring it up, but it goes to, these conversations happen and then they die. Nothing really sort of ever followed through. Sam Young did some amazing work, and so we could see the power of activism. And so Bishop's interviews changed. Policies were put in the handbook around that. When I got to work with the powerhouse that is Sarah, she would use terminology like, we need to, whatever, or we need to do this, right? We need to contact MPs, members of parliament. We need to, whatever the next plan was. And at one point, so we work with the podcasting group that are affectionately referred to as the Brit Avengers, and we all discuss everything that's coming up that we're talking about. And in a brainstorming session, Sarah and one of the other guys, Julian, it had evolved. We need to write to the church leaders. We need to write to every bishop in the United Kingdom and spell out, this is what your legal responsibility is. If the law had stated, the law still states that if you knowingly have someone work with a vulnerable person, a child who's on, and that the person that you've called is on the barred list, someone who's barred from working with children, then you are subject to a couple of years in jail and a pretty hefty fine. Do you know that? And one of the reasons we could do that is because there was an inquiry, a huge inquiry that lasted for years, and it was about abuse in religions. And so lots and lots of religions and organisations were giving evidence. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints in the UK was asked to give evidence. And one of the clear statements that was made by the lawyer was, the person who's responsible, who oversees safeguarding, so if there's an abuse complaint or something that is of concern, the person who's responsible for that at a ward level is the bishop. Now, if you were a bishop and you know that actually the church lawyers are saying this is on you, then you need to know that. And so if all the bishops know that and they're asking questions and the stake presidents are asking questions, then those conversations will start. Now, in the meantime, so the letter went out. In the meantime, we had been working with external charities, because what the church needs to do is work with other external organisations. Don't be so introverted. You can learn, they can teach you. Most other religions are doing this, have safeguarding officers and external oversight. They pay them, and rightly so. We were presenting to national conferences, international conferences about what the church and abuse, what the situation is, what things are strong. Membership records and annotations. Generally, that's a horrible thing, but actually, can you imagine if someone who wants to access vulnerable groups, not just children, but also elderly people, disabled people, immigrants, if there is a risk, that person, if they move into another ward, that membership record has been annotated. Now, other churches don't all have that kind of joined up system. So that's something we wanted to highlight. But here are the problems. And I think this is where sort of how women communicate comes into it too, because we weren't being confrontational. We weren't having, the church is being really awful and really evil, because the church actually thinks it's doing its best. The members think they're doing its best. This is a lack of, understanding and education and priorities being wrong. What we did was we engaged, and church lawyers, stake presidents, have been incredibly supportive. They have also been pains in our ass. We have been pains in their ass. And we have this mutual respect which has evolved. So there are really, really good men who are trying their best. And I say men because women have not been involved in this process other than us. So yes, we finally got a policy in the United Kingdom. The church created this policy that said everyone who's working with children has to have a background check. and that will check the barred list. We could provide evidence that actually had some of those checks happened previously. Historic incidents of abuse within the UK church would not have happened. So we were able to evidence these things. What else? Safeguarding, stake safeguarding specialists have been called in every stake. Training is happening. Really good things. Is it enough? Is it going just perfectly? Actually, I think the church is a little bit disheartened at times, because I think with this new policy, having to DBS check so many people, and also acknowledge lots of people just don't want to have a DBS check.
Yeah.
They choose, no, thank you. And that is completely your right. And we don't get to project any reasons from that. Some people are just incredibly averse to things like that. However, if you want to serve in this way, then you have to comply with that. So yes, I think the church is a bit possibly disheartened by how long it's taking for this to be a really tight process where everyone has been DBS checked. But I think in most wards, I think they're probably around about 80 to somewhere between 80 and sort of, the higher percent above that. Members are all DBS checked. They are working on it. The system itself is incredibly slow, which is not the church's fault. The church passes along the information. So I would say don't be disheartened, church. I would also say, the training needs to be looked at. We are asking for external oversight. We're asking for governments need to have clear policies in place that will compel religious organisations to have clear policies about the welfare of specific policies around the welfare of vulnerable groups. Now, what we don't have just now is those background checks applying to all vulnerable groups. It's just children. And as we know, for example, elderly people in the Mormon church are more financially vulnerable than other people. Someone can take you into a room and talk to you about your finances. Now, here in the UK, if someone was to do that, a lawyer would be calling family members to say, are you aware that your family member is making this financial decision? There is oversight around that. But when you're in the church, it becomes a lot more fuzzy. So there's vulnerabilities, and just, that with the best will in the world, bishops aren't always aware that some of the language that they're using almost compounds that vulnerability. This elderly person doesn't have a choice, because they're not going to go to heaven if they don't. They're not going to be able to serve in the temple. It's seen as an insurance. So yes, lots of these things that we are still pushing for. And I honestly, and I know that she would disagree, the power behind that has been Sarah Delaney.
Yeah,
she's phenomenal.
And I don't know, I would have to have someone with more legal, I have zero legal expertise. So someone with legal expertise would have to tell me the difference. But it's my understanding that this is a United Kingdom law. It's not the church's law. It's
Europe. Yes.
Yes. And so, and I know I just put on my TikTok that in the state of Arizona, they have just passed a law that if you commit any kind of child abuse to a child 12 and below, it is automatic prison. There is no whatever. But that's in Arizona. And I don't think, and I can imagine that the church, it would be overwhelming. You've got primary from the age of 3 years old until 12. You have people teaching. Then you have young men's. Then you have young women's. Then you have some kind of a priesthood get together. We're all going to go camping. So, basically, you would have to do a background check on almost every single person in the ward, because at some point they're going to be working with the youth. And I can see where that would be overwhelming. But the scariest part was when the Brit Vengers, when you said we are going to send out a letter to every bishop in the United Kingdom and say, did you know that if you put a man in charge of teaching the 4-year-olds in primary, and there is any kind of a background that he had any kind of a record, you're going to jail? And they were like, wait, what? We did not know that. And in America, that's exactly what they did when the father was abusing the children in Bisbee, Arizona, and they went to 2 different bishops. The bishops called the church hotline. The church hotline said, don't call anybody, don't call the police, don't report it, we'll take care of it. And then the abuse continued. And that, I think that's why this new Arizona law has gotten passed. But I don't have anything to back that up. But that's where I don't know if the American church is doing what you're doing in the UK.
Yeah. Well, what I definitely would say is that the people who are making decisions and have the power to make decisions are not always completely empowered to do everything. And it's been a learning process for them too. I know that they haven't seen the vulnerabilities in the system. We have this assumption of the illusion of safety. You feel like your child is safe because we're told we're safe. This is complete news to people. The victim survivors who have come forward have shared their stories in powerful ways that we were then able to, where it was appropriate, engage with church leaders on their behalf, sometimes offering the church, where the church has actually always been fantastic at this part. When a victim survivor has felt it would be helpful to speak to someone in authority, the church has facilitated that. And those meetings have generally been very eye-opening for the leaders, which has in turn been helpful and empowering for the family. Now, that wouldn't necessarily be the case across the board where it is appropriate. So in the US, this can so easily be replicated. I mean, California has some clear rules. Safeguarding is never completely done. And all you need to do is just start having the conversation. Ask for people to be trained. Ask for, a little bit of coordination. Are your local and sort of national state lawmakers, do they know what the situation is, what the vulnerabilities are in this situation? Do they know what the vulnerabilities are? The numbers that it's affecting and how it can affect them, making them a little bit accountable for providing answers on it, having them engage with church leaders, because church leaders don't necessarily feel comfortable. In fact, we remember we had a very, very freaked out bishop who had been sent a letter by a local member of parliament who had some questions, and it just freaked him out. Now, we should be very clear. Hold on, we have these policies and here is what we do. And yes, I'm the person in charge, and we should be excited to engage with that. There is a framework for the Latter-day Saint people to have the strongest policies in the world about safeguarding. We have this continuing revelation thing. We have a sort of open canon. Right. Policies, when a policy comes in, and this is what we were sort of seeing in the UK, when you bring a policy in and you think, oh, this is going to be a doozy, will people go for it? People across the world will do it instantly. Now, you will get some resistance. Some people may need a little bit of sort of support, but when it comes to child protection, people will be on your side. You will get people who are just not on board with the paperwork side of things. I think especially for organisations where it's not safe. So, for example, in some states where governments doing background checks may actually cause safety problems for individuals involved. And I'm sort of thinking about sort of countries that aren't democratic. So that's some of the reasons why, having a global church policy could potentially be really difficult. What do we do with families who have practiced polygamy, who there are multiple children involved and multiple families involved, and these things could lead to consequences? And all we need to do is start the conversation. We just need to be talking about these things and convert it to action. So yes, this is completely doable. Yeah.
So it's so amazing. It's so great. And you're right. And Ruth, is also amazing. I know she's jumped onto your thing too, and it's
Ruth is the other member of our team who's so smart and so wise, and again, she's just very done with Mormonism, and so she's sort of, but she's there and around, and we have a phenomenal team, and very, very smart, experienced people that are worth listening to. Any woman in the church who has the kind of credentials that you should be using them. What are you thinking? These are experienced, smart people.
Yeah, because that's where they get their respect and use that clout. You've got clout, take advantage of it. So that's, and what I wanted to point out as we end this is you were right when you were saying this isn't just a Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. This isn't a Mormon thing. There is a Christian church, movement right now to identify the abuse that's going on in a lot of clerical situations, and especially for young girls, not necessarily children, but girls over the age of 12, 14, 15, 16-year-old girls that are involved in youth groups, and they've got a youth pastor. And that's one thing the church, we don't have these youth pastors. So, we have usually married men or that are involved with youth activities and things. But I wanted to close out by showing you a little clip from, I just did a podcast with D-Base, and he's so great at pulling up what's current news. And he brought this to my attention, this thing that was happening in Florida. And I wanted to show this to you, make sure I've got it in the right spot. So watch this.
Two last articles here that I think are pretty interesting. Number one, the LDS Church has silenced and punished women who don't keep sweet and protect LDS men as they do as they're told by church leaders. This woman was threatened with a disciplinary council for apostasy and had her temple recommend taken away for speaking to friends about her divorce. Let's check this out here from Jen over there at Jen Next Door on Twitter, who follows the space very carefully. This is absolutely shocking.
Former member of the LDS Church says her stake president disciplined her because she, quote, talked too much.
Chris Jones with the exclusive interview for us tonight. And Chris, Tiercy Hadlock says she went to her church leader for comfort.
Yeah, and she says she was getting anything but. She says that her life was falling apart, and the advice that she was getting from her church leaders was growing more and more alarming. So kind of on a whim, she pulled out her cell phone during two of the meetings and began recording. And this is what she heard.
Oh, that hurt. It cut like a knife.
For faithful Mormon Tiercy Hadlock, this following sentence from her stake president crushed her.
To not follow counsel and direction from your priesthood leaders, there's a name for that. That's called apostasy.
To me, it was akin to like the worst thing that you could be called.
An apostate, not for an affair or for shunning the church, but for not being quiet about her painful divorce.
I talked to my closest friends about it a lot because it was the way that I processed things.
In addition to being labeled an apostate, the stake president had even more discipline for her.
We took your temple recommend away because you emphatically said you would not stop talking about this with other people.
An apostate, revoked temple recommend. All this after Hadlock says her ex-husband and a woman in the ward were tangled in an emotional affair. But Hadlock says neither of them received any punishment.
They get to do all of that, and there's no consequence for their behavior. And because I am hurt and struggling and trying to process it, I get my recommend taken away.
And then in a later meeting, after she continued to talk about her divorce, the stake president raised the stakes again.
I would like you to reevaluate how you really feel about this. And if you can't, Tiercy, we're going to convene a disciplinary council.
These recordings happened last year, but Hadlock says she had to speak out now because of the Me Too movement, the LDS Church's support of a bill outlawing recordings like hers, and news that LDS bishops told the ex-wives of Rob Porter not to leave him after he allegedly beat them.
I needed to speak my piece. I needed to speak my truth. This is the time to share it and hopefully get other people.
It's amazing who gets a discipline.
So that was, I had not heard that. I couldn't believe that was on the news in Florida.
Right.
Something as personal as that. But it brings me to, I'm going to let you go, Jane. And I'm going to, hi, Ronan, how are you? You're so handsome. And I'm going to let you go, but I want to show a little bit about a documentary
Yeah.
that's out there now called For Our Daughters, where people in other Christian religions are being faced with the same thing, where they're being sexually abused by a pastor, by some kind of clergy, and the clergy admits it. He stands and he says, I'm so sorry. I was wrong. I was bad. I'm so sorry. And the congregation stands, they clap, they give him just love.
Oh, wow.
And for the woman, it's like, you need to shut up now because he's been forgiven by God and you don't have a voice. And it takes me back to the Thelma and Louise when Louise says to her, they wouldn't have believed you if we would have, because Thelma wanted to go to the police and say, this is what happened. And she said, they wouldn't have believed you. And this is 1991. And here we are in 2024, where women are saying he did this or he said that, or I don't believe that that gentleman should have been doing that, or this was inappropriate. And they go, he's a good man. He's in the bishopric, or he's a doctor. And I mean, the floodlit has opened up the door for all of the people in very high professions. It's really sad, but you're right, Jane. It's the women. We need to use our voices. And if, as you mentioned, I love that you pointed this out, if you have professional training, you've got initials behind your name, your voice is so needed. And please help all the rest of us lowly little people, do what we want to do to protect our children, to protect our young women, and to give a voice to the changes that need to be happening. And it's not just doctrine or policy, it's human correct behavior that we're looking for.
I'm so, Davis does such a phenomenal job. And covering that is wonderful. But I'm thinking about the woman coming forward in the first place and sharing the worst things, because it's come one after another that has ever happened in her life, and sharing that vulnerability. It's that discernment, the inner knowing, we're going to jump off this cliff. We think about the ending of Thelma and Louise as being, that's the clear ending, and okay. But metaphorically, women are doing this all the time. We're going to jump, we're going to take that risk. I think it's also just really, really significant, as we're sort of wrapping up this week, not just in the UK, but the repercussions across the world, the decisions that men can make to excommunicate, to call someone apostate, the worst thing that you can be called in the church. You could use the word satanic. Let's face it, it's the exact opposite of what you're supposed to be. All of the implications around that word. Our dear friend Nemo the Mormon has been subject to, he was called to a court last Thursday, and I think the world is still the world is still living in that trauma. It's still very raw, very vulnerable. The family are going through, I mean, it's hell. It's hellish. Nemo is my mate. Nemo was helping us with every single bishop in the UK. We needed their address, the address of the meeting house. And he sat looking through every single meeting house on Google Earth to get this young guy who is, we tease mercilessly. He is wonderful. He has done so much to support us. He's practically been our office boy, and it is just so gracious. Helps us workshop ideas that, along with the rest of the gang, to put Nemo through that.
Yeah. And
to still, at this point, we're all still waiting to see what happens next. Now,
You're right.
Normally when I'm podcasting, I make some bit of an effort, but I wanted to make sure you could all sort of see visually, this is where we all are at this week. Nemo's coping in very healthy ways. He's taking a break. But Sarah was interviewed by one of the most popular podcast YouTube channels, TikTok channels, Lad Bible. So they had originally interviewed Nemo, and they were there filming, interviewing Nemo that day. So that content is still to come out. But Sarah got to have a few words with the interviewers at the time, and she was pointing out, and it's coming back to these themes of integrity. Where is God in this? Where is God in this process? Because he is not to be found here. And the main, I think, struggle for us all this week is we are feeling that there is very little integrity to be seen. Some church leaders have been phenomenal, but for the most part, what I would say is, as women, is I have had the honor of witnessing what feels like the women at the feet of the cross. The women in the family who this is horrific for, and these are good people. These are good people. So yes, sometimes we have to just jump off the cliff. Sometimes we have to just do it and say the hard things. And yes, there will be consequences. Sometimes we are going to get the slap in the face. Sometimes we are going to get, excommunicated for raising our voice. But we are very good at witnessing. Ronan has had so many experiences in the LDS church that have been so traumatic. People like Nemo have given Ronan, helped him find an identity. There are words to describe how he feels about church. Do you want to tell everyone about church? Ronan Christie
is an ex-Mormon.
And that helps Ronan to know that people aren't going to come and bother him, that he doesn't have to go back to church and feel hurt and scared and upset.
And push.
And like you want to push people away because you just want space. Nemo the Mormon has shown us a way to be ex-Mormon healthily, and also showed us a way to be Mormon healthily. And I'm just really thankful for that. And I'm really glad to be able to have this chat with you tonight, Renee, because you have been, just to have your girls, just to have that space where we can, we can get it. Girl podcasters, we have our work cut out.
We have our work.
Yeah.
So, Jane, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because that's such a perfect way to just to compact everything that we've talked about and to bring it back to, you might have to jump off a cliff. And that's exactly what Nemo was doing, trying to, and to call someone an apostate who bears his testimony of his love for the temple work, for the work that he was doing. He's just saying, please stop lying. Please don't say deceitful things. That's all. I'm not saying that you have to, just maybe apologize and say, we're so sorry. That was deceitful. We didn't mean to be, whatever. But the arrogance of not ever apologizing. And as I mentioned, when I was talking with Dives, the scariest part is you see this same behavior in other authoritarian, fascist organizations where you cannot criticize. They never do wrong. Things are done behind the curtain, and they're never, years and years and years will go by before they're ever divulged. And then it's whitewashed and taken out of the history books. And when you see that in a religion that claims to be the only true living Christ-centered religion on the earth, it's devastating. It is devastating. And that's all he was doing. And to use the word apostate and to kick him out is just, it's barbaric, it's cruel, and it's not Christ-like. I don't, it doesn't correlate very well. And I'm glad you brought that up and reminded everybody, but it's such a great way to end the program. And I really hope that Jane's movement and her actions and all of you ladies, and I'm going to show a little clip from this documentary to end up the program, but these women have done exactly what you said, Jane. They didn't say anything until they finally knew they had to. And that's where you see the Me Too movement. That's where you see people like Kate Kelly and other people that have come forward. They do it when they have to. And that's so brave. That's so brave. And what you're doing and the podcast that you made after you decided that that was it, you couldn't take it, was so brave, because we knew where you stood and it was a shock. And we knew you were hurting to do that. So I love you. I'm so sad we've got credit on that airline. So we're going to be over there at some point. Maybe after.
We will make sure it's going to be spectacular.
It
yes.
will be fabulous. So, all right. Thank you so much. Good night, Ronan. Thank you.
Good night.
Night.
Say good night.
Good
night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Okay. Bye-bye. Oh, that was beautiful. Oh, you guys. The last couple of podcasts that I've made have been with women that have, Jane is raising a young man with special needs. And I was with I was with Jean, and we interviewed a woman who lost her baby. She only lived 30 days, and it was devastating. It destroyed her marriage, which is very common. 80% of divorces, the people that have a child with a disability, end in divorce. It's a struggle. And I wish I could tell these people, I know they look strong. I know these women with their children look strong, but they're crying inside and they need help. And it's not a casserole. It's not a loaf of bread. I have the most beautiful children, I have to tell you. I have a daughter that has a son with severe autism, and she volunteers to help other mothers with children with autism. And she caregives for these people so that they can get away for a little bit. And I see these women that bring these children to church, and they sit in the foyer and they sit in the gym, and they don't want to bother anyone else out. But you need to be active in your community in other ways besides verbally. And it may be real, like Jane was saying, it might require some training. It might require being uncomfortable. But there were so many women in my life that helped me out with my son. And I cannot thank them enough for what they did. These were the most loving, kind women. And I will say, and I mentioned it when we did his celebration of life after he passed, I thank the women that were there for me. When my daughter lost her husband in a car accident and we needed to go to Seattle quickly, I knew who I could call. Will you help us take care of our severely disabled son so that I can go be with my daughter? And they were there. So there are these beautiful people out there. Jane is one of them, and Sarah and Ruth and these other people that are trying to get laws passed. It's not apostasy. It's not revenge. They're trying to get people protected. And as we close, I'm going to show you a little clip from a new documentary that's out there that I just want to use it as a trailer to encourage you to watch this and see what these women are doing. Listen to them. Believe them. Believe your children. Believe your gut. When you feel uncomfortable or you feel as though there's not something right, you don't need to worry about offending that person. You need to protect your children and your family. And that's really what this message is all about. I'm so grateful that I have a Thelma living in Scotland that I know I could probably call in the middle of the night and she would be there to comfort me. I know that I have women here in Utah. I have women in Arizona. I have women in Oregon that I could call and they would be there for me. And I'm so grateful for that. So I hope you have enjoyed this podcast. Thank you again, Jane, for everything that you've done. And we will see you again next week. Bye-bye.
I was raised to be a wife and a mother one day. So my whole purpose was to become this godly woman and not to serve my own needs or desires.
As a girl growing up in the church through the purity culture, what I really gained from that was that if I was this amazing Christian woman who loved the Lord and was a good person, then the most I could hope for was God was going to bring me this amazing, godly Christian man.
I was raised in the church. So the idea that these men, pastors, watch over your soul, this was the fishbowl I swam in. This was simply all I knew.
But what Kate, Jules, and Krista didn't know was that the men who claimed to be their guides and protectors cared far less about them than about their own power. Their power over women and their power over the country.
How do you make America great again? You make America Christian again.
We get called, well, you're a Christian nationalist. You want the kingdom to be the government. Yes.
The point of Christian nationalism, my goal, is to break American democracy.
I'm going to be a dictator for one day.
We need total dictator Trump. The Constitution is invalid.
Christian nationalists see themselves as entrusted with this duty to take back the country.
God, we didn't come just to go to church. We came to go to war.
Their plan for winning this war is for Christian men to be aggressive, militantly masculine, even violent. And if they win, American women will be required to give them control of their bodies, just like the Christian women who have already been living under their authority.
My dad would say that he is the prophet, priest, and king of the household. And we were taught that men were strong and powerful and protectors, and they had a lot of positive language to describe the patriarchs. And then women had to be the helpers and to submit.
I have 4 people in my life that I dictate the hours in their day. I dictate what time they go to the bathroom, when we eat, what we wear. Those are the people that I have almost limitless authority with.
Anytime I showed a strong individual desire, then that was shut down. So I had to be quiet and weak just to survive. My whole goal in life was to grow up, get married, and have children. And we didn't believe in things like birth control. So the expectation was that we'd have as many children as possible. And our parents would use us to bring about this change in the country. We would make the country a Christian country.
Godly women want to feed their men. Godly women are designed to make the sandwiches. But this is not an absolute law like the one about making babies.
Christians need to be thoughtful about this with our kids. They're all arrows. They're all to be sharp and they're all to do damage to the enemy. But we want our daughters to grow up seeing what they're for.
We're just going to outbreed these people. We are.
There has been a lot of talk about Christian nationalists' drive to take over the country and about their strict view of the roles of women and men. What's been hidden until now is that their views of what men and women should be like in the new America are already triggering one of the most shocking sexual abuse scandals in